Okay, welcome to video number 21 of the Diaries of a Coronavirologist YouTube channel. Today is the 13th of May and we are up to about 4.3 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 and about 296,000 confirmed deaths. So in my video today, I want to talk a little bit about easing lockdown. It's something that's making the news in a lot of places, and a lot of places are attempting to ease lockdown. And in my opinion, some of those places are trying to rush this and are doing it too soon without the infrastructure that might allow them to do it safely. And this could lead to a resurgence in cases. But it is possible to ease lockdown. So I kind of want to talk a bit about the ways it could be done more effectively and the things that we need to be looking at, in my opinion. In order to do this, I'm going to do a bit of a comparison between South Korea and the United States, because these are an interesting comparator, because they got the first case on roughly the same day back in January. And I'm going to be talking a lot in this about testing, because I think testing is a really important aspect of easing lockdown. But I don't really want to go too much into the details about the tests. So if anyone's not watched videos before, I recommend going back to video number 11 that I posted, which was on testing. I talked about the RT-PCR test to work out if people are positive for SARS2 infection and therefore have potentially have COVID-19, and the serology testing, looking for antibodies that show if you have had a SARS infection. So just before I jump into the comparison between South Korea and America to illustrate some points about what I think needs to be done in order to ease lockdown, I want to say that this video is probably going to come out a bit longer than the others because I'm going to play around with my idea of incorporating questions at the end. So I'm going to try and keep the main topic to my usual 10 minutes or so of talking, but then I'm going to answer a few questions. So it's something I've mentioned on my last couple of videos, but to bring it up again. People have left some really good and interesting questions on each of my videos that I've tried to largely get to typing answers out for in the comments, but I haven't always found time. So I thought I'd start to try and incorporate some of the questioning into the videos and answer them in person, as it were. So this video is going to come out a bit longer, but it's because of those questions. As always, I've got the timestamps, or I'm going to put the timestamps down in the summary of this video, the description of this video, that's the word I was looking for. So you can see when the main part of the video ends, and if you don't want to look at the questions or listen to the questions, then you can, of course, not worry about them. If you don't like the idea of the questions being on the channel, please let me know down in the comments. If you do like the idea, please let me know, and please feel free to leave questions and I'll try and tackle them. But just something I'm toying with. As I've said on this channel before, I want this to be a good source of information and something of value out there in all of the COVID noise. And if answering questions makes this a little bit more valuable, then that's good. And if it makes it, means people get put off by the length of the videos, then maybe I'll take it out. But we'll see. Anyway, with that said, I'll get into tonight's topic. So as I say, I want to compare South Korea and the United States because a big part of what I think is important for easing lockdown is testing and contact tracing. And looking at South Korea versus America is a good way to illustrate this. So as I said, both countries had their first case on pretty much the same day, so around the 20th, 21st of January. But since then, they've followed very different courses in the outbreak they have experienced. Right now, the United States has had just under 1.4 million confirmed COVID-19 cases, while South Korea has had about 11,000 confirmed cases. So there's a whole order of magnitude difference between the two places. Now, obviously, the two countries have very different population sizes, so it may be reasonable to assume that America would have more cases. The population of the United States is roughly 330 million, compared to South Korea's about 51 million. So let's look at the numbers in terms of more per capita or per head numbers. I've got the numbers written down here just to make sure I check them. And the source for these is Our World in Data, the website ourworldindata.org, which is a very good one for COVID-related numbers, along with the Johns Hopkins tracking website where I get all of my daily counts. So right now, as of the 13th of May, or possibly the 12th of May, the United States is testing 28 people for every 1,000 people in the country, compared to South Korea's 13. So right now, as of May the 13th, America is testing more people per population. So that's good. However, America only overtook South Korea on the 16th of April. So all the way through February and all the way through March, South Korea were testing more of its population than America. And this allowed South Korea to bring the outbreak under control, which is why they don't need to be testing so extensively anymore. So another way to look at these numbers and this level of testing is the number of tests that have been performed per positive case. And in America, for every positive case that there has been of COVID-19, or 1.4 million, there have been about 7 tests per positive test. In South Korea, there's been 62. So for every one of those 11,000 cases in South Korea, there have been 62 other tests performed. So the bottom line of all this is South Korea have tested much more extensively and much more rapidly than America. So now they don't need to be testing so extensively because they brought it under control. They peaked, they hit their cases, and it came way down to almost 0 new cases. Now there has been a little resurgence as of this week that I'll come to in a moment, but I just want to point out at this juncture that South Korea enacted much more rapid testing, much more extensive testing than America, and as the numbers are showing, they have dealt with this much better. Now, one of the reasons that South Korea were able to do this is that they had learned from their past experiences with 2 other coronaviruses, so SARS-1 and MERS, the other 2 highly pathogenic human coronaviruses. So they were hit hard by SARS-1, and they were also hit hard by MERS. So in 2015, for example, MERS arrived in South Korea, and there was a very large outbreak associated with hospital spread. So over 180 people were infected, and about 40 of those died. So that's about 20% of the people who were infected died from MERS. In the wake of that, and from their past experience with SARS-1, the country enacted various measures to be prepared next time. So they put in place infrastructure to allow rapid development of tests and to have tests ready to go that could be easily adapted to any new emerging pathogen. And they also put into law the ability to have some pretty extreme contact tracing. Now, I kind of consider it some degree of invasion of privacy, and I'm not sure I'd want to have this enacted where I live, but it's been very good at helping them combat SARS-CoV-2 spread in South Korea. So the systems that are in place are things like using CCTV footage to work out where people have been, collecting phone location data from the network carriers to work out where people have taken their phones, and using credit card transaction histories to work out where people have been. So it's possible for the South Korean government to work out where people have been during times of disease spread in order to rapidly and effectively contact trace. So with this combination of being able to rapidly test people and find out who is infected and then perform contact tracing allows South Korea to have the system to really get on top of the disease outbreak very quickly, as the evidence would suggest. So if they find someone who's infected 3 or 4 days after they were first infected, or 5 days as the average symptom onset, they can look back over those last 5 days or further and see where they've been. They can use their phone data, their credit card transaction, work out what shops they've been to, what restaurants, what bars, etc., and look to see who else was in those places, and then go and test all of those people that may have come into contact with the person that's known to be infected. So by doing this, you start to get up to those kind of numbers of having 62 people tested for every 1 positive case, because there's this mass contact tracing. So as I said, South Korea did really start to get on top of the SARS-2 outbreak and got down to having almost no new cases. There has been a small resurgence, though, just over the weekend. There's a story of one person who went to 5 bars in a district in Seoul and is possibly responsible for around 100 confirmed cases, I think, or maybe it's 100 suspected cases. And the reason that we know all this is because of that person who had been to the 5 bars over the weekend developing a fever, getting rapidly tested, finding that they were positive, and then the contact tracing system kicks in and allows the government or the authorities to go in and trace all the people that could have come into contact with the one infected person and test them for COVID-19, and then force quarantine measures. Now, because of having all of these systems in place, South Korea hasn't had to directly enforce social distancing in the same way that places like America and the UK and other places in Europe have. They've had advisory social distancing, which has been well observed, but it hasn't been enforced because they are able to enforce quarantine on the people they know are infected, and they're able to test so extensively for who is infected. So it's these kind of systems and this kind of level of testing that I think we need to have in wherever in order to end lockdown. We need to be able to test really extensively to find out who is infected and to test people they may have come into contact with. The quicker you can find if someone's infected and the quicker you can test the people that they may have infected, the easier it is to put those people into quarantine and to shut this whole thing down again. Now, right now, a lot of places aren't at that level. As I said, I don't necessarily want to be somewhere where all of my phone data and all of my credit card transactions are being traced and I'm being filmed on every CCTV camera and all those kind of things, although probably is happening, let's be honest. But just having a system of contact tracing. So in New York, they are hiring people to be contact tracers. So this is a good step. It's the step in the right direction. So if, for example, I were to become sick, test positive for COVID-19, I would have someone who phones me up and says, I hear you're positive for COVID-19. Where have you been over the last week or 2 weeks? Who have you come into contact with? Can you tell them that you are positive and get them to go tested? If you don't know them, then the contact tracer can go to, say, a restaurant, ask them who was working that day, do they know any of the people that were in there, and to try and track down as many people that I may have come into contact with. So if we can put these systems in place, that's how I think lockdown can be ended safely and effectively. I don't think we're there yet. I think it's where we need to get to. And I think that's how we can do this with the least damage to human health and life. So that's just my opinions on this, really. I've tried to use the information of South Korea and the United States, the comparison between the two and how South Korea has handled this so much more effectively because it has the contact tracing and testing, to illustrate my point that I think that's where everywhere needs to get to in order to safely end lockdown with the minimal amount of loss of life. But like I say, that's just opinion based on the information I have. As things get as lockdown is eased and places start to open back up, I'm curious to see what will happen. I think there will be surges in cases, and I think we'll see lockdowns reenacted unless we can really, really extensively test. So I hope that we get to that point of being able to test very heavily in all of the places that are trying to ease lockdown as is going on. And again, apologies that maybe my views here are a little bit America and UK centric. It's just those are the places I know best. And I guess maybe the majority of my audience are from those places. I could be wrong. Sorry to the places I know less about. Okay, so at that stage, I want to end tonight's topic. But as you may see, there's still time left on the YouTube video because I want to try and put in a little bit of a new idea I've been playing around with that I've mentioned on my last couple of videos, which is to try and tackle some of the questions. So people are leaving really good questions on each of my videos, and I've tried to get to answer them in the comments sections, but I haven't always managed to find time. So I've started to think maybe I should just do them in videos and speak them through because maybe that's quicker and easier since I'm already here filming. If people don't like this as an idea, please leave a comment down below. Say that you don't think I should do it, or it makes the videos too long, or whatever. Give me some constructive feedback, please, if you don't like it. And if you do like it, please leave some questions, or just leave the positive feedback that you think it's a good idea to have this extra little section. I'm going to try and keep all of the all of my answers to the questions short. So ideally, no more than a minute. So it means I won't go into necessarily all that much detail, or I may explain things a little bit too quickly and not the way I'd like to explain them. But the majority of them I'll either have already done a video on before, which I'll mention, or I intend to do another video on the topic anyway. So there will be more extensive answers to each of the questions. But just as a way to try and tackle some of the input I'm getting on the channel from people in the comments section, I thought maybe I should start doing quick question and answer sessions to just add some extra stuff to the channel and try and make it useful. So with that said, I'll go into 3 of the questions tonight. So welcome to the inaugural Q&A part of the videos. First question I want to tackle is why are vaccines not subject to placebo testing like other drugs, which was asked on my last video. So generally they are. Any good vaccine trial will have a placebo control to it. And I'll lead into that a little bit in my next question. Any of the trials that don't have a vaccine, it's probably because it's at the very early stage. So a lot of the trials that are going on now are those early phase 1 trials where the main goal of the trial is to see if the vaccine is safe and effective. So looking to see if it causes anything more extensive than just maybe a sore arm and a bit of a rash at the site of injection, and to see if it's producing effective antibodies. So all the people that are getting the injections and the test vaccines, it will be monitoring to see if they have any adverse reactions, and then taking blood from them to see if they produce antibodies that can inhibit infection of the virus in the lab. It's the kind of experiments that we sometimes find ourselves doing, not necessarily associated with a vaccine trial, I hasten to add, but to see if antibodies and sera can inhibit infection of SARS2 in the lab, to see if it's effective. So if there's not a placebo, it's probably because it's just those early phases where you don't really need the placebo because there's no reason to test a sugar vaccine or something for antibodies against SARS2. But when it comes to really testing to see if it's going to work, then there will be placebo arms. So the next question I want to tackle, I think, came on 2 videos ago, and it asked me to talk about the Oxford vaccine that's being trialled, and I'm very happy to talk about that because Oxford is pretty much my hometown. So I'm definitely going to do a video on that vaccine. It's possibly going to be the next one I post, might be the one after the next one, but it does merit its own video so I can explain things properly. But to do it in this quick Q&A session, the vaccine that's being used there is being called ChAdOx1. So this is ChAdOx. So that's chimp, adenovirus, Oxford. So adenovirus is another group of viruses. So in the same way coronavirus is a group of virus, adenoviruses are a group of viruses that are DNA viruses. And there's adenoviruses that infect humans and can cause common colds. So it can cause similar disease to some of the coronaviruses, but they're very different. So what the vaccine has done is they've engineered a chimp adenovirus to express the SARS spike protein. So when that virus gets into cells in the body, those cells will produce the spike protein, but nothing else. It's otherwise a replication deficient virus. And I'll talk about that in much more detail in the video. But it's very similar in methodology to the Moderna vaccine that I talked about in video number 15 on the channel. So there, it's just using straight mRNA that goes into a cell and tricks the cell to make spike. This is using a virus to do it with DNA instead. But it's largely the same idea. So the cells will produce spike that go out, the immune system detects it, and then mounts an antibody response, such that if you encounter the real virus, you can mount an antibody response that might protect it. I did just drop a pen if you heard that noise. And so that's the Oxford vaccine in short. So the final question I'm going to do quickly is one that I'm definitely going to do another video on at some point next week, the early part of next week. So the question was, do you believe the wet market origin or that it came from a lab? So I am still very heavily on the line of this is a natural virus. This is not a man-made virus. I talked about the origin of the outbreak back in video number 6. for anyone who wants to go back. But this has all of the hallmarks of being something that's come from nature. The line that I've used on this video, and lots of people are using, is Mother Nature is much better at this than we ever could be as humans, or ever are as humans. So this virus is closely related. The closest virus we know is related to this is from a bat called rat G13, 2013. And there is good evidence, scientific evidence, for the fact that bat viruses can spill over into the human population. MERS came from a bat virus that infected camels and came into humans. SARS, it came from a bat virus that infected palm civet cats and infected humans. Ebola came from bats. Nipah, Hendra came from bats. I'll probably do a video talking about bats more extensively, but there's good evidence for the fact that viruses can evolve in wildlife and then infect humans. There is not evidence for people engineering viruses and deliberately releasing them, or even accidentally releasing them. There's very few instances of accidental releases of viruses from high containment labs. Now, in terms of the wet food market origin, that is starting to be questioned. There's suggestions that this virus was circulating in the human population before we noticed it being associated with the wet food market. But this virus is, all evidence is pointing towards the fact this virus is from nature, and it's a naturally occurring virus that has come into the human population. And like I say, I'll do a much more extensive video on that though, because I want to talk about it in more detail. And with that, I'll end the question section. So, like I said at the top of the question section, please leave comments if you don't like this edition and you don't like the videos being a bit longer. If you do like it, please also let me know, just so I'm aware. And ask questions if you want some stuff answered. I'll try and keep it in that kind of style, quicker answers where I've not necessarily done as much reading up as I do for the main topic, but just to try and give people the answers to the things they're thinking about. Anyway, that's where I'll stop for tonight. As always, please stay safe, wash your hands, and keep calm and carry on. We will get through this.